Sure. Thanks, Tony.
Okay, I'll start then. Okay, so this is okay. So solutions and discussion. This is part 6, and I thought, well, there might be more than just the 4 of us here, so I was optimistic. So I planned a separate version. And by the way, Happy Earth Day. So we can skip right to an awful lot of stuff. I wanted to explain, of course, that this is part 6. And in order to talk about solutions, obviously you have to understand the problems which were elaborated here. This you haven't seen. This is one of the students were asked to supply comments or questions, and Ayush Mangrolia hit the nail on the head, I think. Unfortunately, I felt real bad. The more we analyze data on potential alternatives to fossil fuels, the bleaker the outlook for the future appears. Limited availability of elements for batteries and solar panels, reliance on unpredictable wind energy, the significant threat of nuclear waste from nuclear energy highlight the challenges. Growing more trees alone won't effectively reduce CO2 levels either. The crux of the issue lies in our dependence on fossil fuels, and overcoming human greed poses a significant barrier to finding a solution. The future of humanity appears to be in serious jeopardy, and it feels like a no-win situation since our reliance on conventional energy resources makes finding a viable solution extremely challenging. It seems our options are limited to merely delaying the inevitable. In such a situation, what actions can we take? So I felt really bad, but this is actually true. It's actually hitting the nail on the head. Fortunately, another student, and I out of the hundreds of comments I got, I only picked a few to address the rest of the class. Yash Gokru provided this comment in the green, orange, and red graph, which I'll show in a minute, on the safe operating space and boundary pie chart. Why is stratospheric ozone depletion the least, even though the concern of ozone layer depletion has been a priority a lot in today's generation? So in the 1980s, the ozone hole was indeed in the red zone. This was a success of science-based government and international cooperation, setting standards, regulation, and a moratorium. And so this is the chart he is talking about. And indeed, because of the Montreal Protocol, because nations got together, governments believed the scientists, and over the objection of corporations, especially Dow and DuPont and other corporations, and the National Chamber of Commerce, and a bunch of economists who believe that we shouldn't be regulating markets. We did adopt a regulation. We adopted a moratorium on CFCs, and we were able to pull the stratospheric ozone the depletion into these in a safe operating space. We still have an ozone hole, but it's shrinking. And so this is a huge success, and it tells us what we have to do to succeed. And so I thought those were 2 good comments that I thought point the way, if you will. And of course, all these others are still in the deep red, and that poses a serious problem for us because no technology can address all of these things. And so we can't expect technology to help us. And just like this was fought tooth and nail by industry and capitalism, these will be too, and they have been. So there are regulatory successes. Whales were saved by the International Whaling Commission, setting standards, regulation, and finally a moratorium in 1982. Otherwise, capitalism would have driven whales to extinction, just like they did the buffalo and so many other species. Once an animal becomes a commodity and you can make money, capitalism is going to drive it to extinction. African slave trade was abolished by an international moratorium imposed by Britain and France, and finally by a civil war, the bloodiest war in our history. Waterfowl in Chesapeake Bay were saved by the Lacey Act in 1900 and Migratory Bird Treaty Act in 1918. This effectively ended commercial hunting and increased habitat protection. Polar bears during the Nixon administration, one of the great things that Richard Nixon signed into law was the Marine Mammal Protection Act. This went global, and polar bears were saved. Eagles were saved by the EPA enforcement of DDT ban, again during the Nixon administration, and this also went, if you will, global. And it didn't just save eagles, but all kinds of birds. Elimination of acid rain is due to international standards. Control of mercury emissions, again due to international standards. And more recently, I should point this out that there's an international ban on dirty bunker fuel for shipping, and so the air has cleaned up remarkably from soot and sulfur pollution. The ozone layer was saved by, again, as we point out, the Montreal International Enforcement of Montreal Protocol. So the point is, we can do this. We can get together. Humanity can act as cooperatively as a global governance, and we can do the right thing. And it requires standards, regulation, moratoriums. And there are other successes, international successes, where cooperation has won the day. We started with the League of Nations. That kind of failed, but the UN, since World War II, has been modestly successful, and it still exists, and in part probably contributed to the fact that we haven't had a third World War. And the UN sponsored the IPCC, which established the reality of human-caused climate change, and UNESCO and lots of other really good deeds. So when we come together and cooperate as a unit, the Homo sapiens, we do achieve some good results. So we'll skip this. This I showed in part one, but I have it here in case somebody showed up who wasn't there. Mainly to show that the universe runs on energy, right? And the second law of thermodynamics. If you're against it, which is capitalism well, not so much capitalism, but the economic ideology which defends it, neoclassical and neoliberal, are in a violation of thermodynamics, and so there's nothing to save them. They're obviously false. I wanted to define for the people what we mean by world. The world is the current state of the Earth system. That's the Holocene. That's the world we live in. That's different than the world that the dinosaurs lived in, or the world during the cryosphere, or the Cryocene, or the Carboniferous, or any other time in Earth's history. The world is the definition of the Earth system, which is a function of time at any given specific time, and it changes with time. We are changing the world. We are bringing our world, the world we're comfortable in, the world we evolved in, we're bringing it to an end. And then human activity is entirely contained, and the human economy is entirely contained in the biosphere, which is entirely contained in the Earth system, which is a thermodynamic heat engine running off of solar radiation and dissipating heat energy into space. Of course, I talked to you folks know about the faint young sun, and how the sun grew warmer with time, very monotonically, and the reason why life was able to be supported is because carbon dioxide was extremely high, 3 or 4 orders of magnitude higher than today, so 1,000 to 10,000 times the amount of carbon dioxide, and it gradually was pulled out of the atmosphere. And this was the inspiration for the Gaia hypothesis. When it was down here, it was fits and starts, though. It wasn't as smooth. When it was down here, it was an ice house. When it was up here, it was a hot house, but it was always within the realm of liquid water and life. Although life took a beating, the life that existed here, when it jumped up here, would go extinct, and vice versa all the way down. There were 2 dips that where the Earth froze nearly solid. And again, CO2 is the principal greenhouse gas. It sucks up energy right at the peak of Earth's black body radiation into space. And then skipping all the way to the last 60,000 years, we see that during the Pleistocene, the climate was pretty jagged, and this is measured at the Greenland surface. It was called N-grip. That's the ice core on the top of Greenland, and so it's not the climate of the globe, but the climate of the globe sort of follows it. And during the Pleistocene, people probably going all the way back to Homo erectus understood at least some aspect of agriculture. They knew that seeds, they could save seeds and plant them the following year. But it wasn't until the last 1,000 years that the climate was stable enough to actually support agriculture, where you could stay in one place. Here, hunter-gatherers, you had to move around. You could move around, you could follow the game, you could follow the climate, because it wasn't changing as rapidly as today. This is a better, more recent picture, and you can see that's pretty bloody smooth, the last 10,000 years. And there are some little dips and fits and bits in there, but it's nothing like what we're causing now. And yet 88 civilizations collapsed in a 4,000-year period here. And it collapsed because of abrupt climate change, overshoot, depletion of resources, increased reliance on complexity, diminishing returns on technology, inequality, and an establishment of an oligarchy. And all of these stresses are in play today, and more, because we're actually polluting the planet's surface, and that's something that we weren't really doing that much back then, with chemicals that never existed before, like endocrine disruptors and plastics. And you can see where, okay, a carbon tax isn't really going to help, because it might address this a little bit. I doubt it, but it's not going to address everything else. And technology isn't really going to save us, because that's an increasing reliance on complexity. It's not. It makes us a little bit more fragile, and we have plenty of technology anyway. And the technology we're creating, we're getting diminishing returns from. I mean, we've had, refrigeration and flying and automobiles and things like that. We've had big technological improvements, but now we get things like Bitcoin and artificial intelligence, which are not going to have the big bang for the buck, but make things more complex. These are the problems, the known problems, starting off with climate change. Starting off, I'm sorry, with how do I get rid of this? Okay, I have something blocking this thing here. Can I get rid of that? No, I can't even get rid of it. Okay, so the known problems are the biosphere collapse, right? And that's the biggie. That is the thing that's happening. We're destroying the biosphere. We're destroying the world as we evolved during the Holocene, during the Holocene. Climate change is only relevant because it is contributing to that. If it wasn't contributing to the loss of species and destroying the biosphere, it wouldn't really be a problem. So what if we're warming the planet? But in fact, it is. And the same thing with nuclear weapons and in conflict. I mean, if all it was killing each other, well, we already have plenty of ways to kill each other, right? So have at it, boys. As long as you don't mess around with the biosphere, you know, it's not a critical part of the problem. But of course, if nuclear weapons and conflict do destroy the environment and other species besides us. And all these other things, endocrine disruptors, forever chemicals, other pollution, overexploitation, habitat destruction. These are the two big ones right now that are causing the collapse of the biosphere. We have extreme wealth and power inequality. Human equality is an overshoot. Of course, there's 6 of 9 planetary boundaries that have already been breached. So these are known problems. And there's more than this maybe, but these are kind of the big categories. So we're looking for an economic theory that encapsulates what we know to be true. And we know all these things are true because we have measurements. We also have known physical laws, and our physical laws, as we talked about in the first lecture, are extremely good. I mean, in fact, they allow MRI machines and the internet and our computers and everything else. And so our known physical laws are valid. And so we need an economic theory which encapsulates the not just the known problems, but the known physical laws. And unfortunately, neoclassical neoliberal economics does not do either of that. So this is thermodynamics. So and again, the biosphere is collapsing. We have plenty of evidence for that. Only 17% of wild mammal biomass is left. This is I prepared this chart today. I showed this chart, but I added because we are now experiencing the Great Barrier Reef mortality, and they declared that this year, and indeed even last year, our global reef mortality event because of the heat. And we'll look at the heat of the oceans now. 2022 was a mortality event in the Great Barrier Reef. 2020 was, and 2017 and 2016, 2010 and 1998. Now, 1998 and 2016 were declared the only global mortality events of coral reefs. And so they were separate. And in the Maldives, in fact, they were the only two. These guys were bleaching events, but they weren't mortality events. And you could see it took 18 years for the corals in the Maldives to recover these type of corals, but these type of corals did not recover completely. And then they got hit again, and these guys went to zero. So what happens is yeah, if you have a lot of time, and by the way, before 1998, there are no known mortality or bleaching events, and nothing that was thought to have been global. May have been some regional or local things, but and maybe moderate bleaching events, but nothing that's historically recorded. So we go from once every say 18 years for global events and maybe regional or local events more frequent than that, but now we're having them almost every year. And you can see the corals just aren't going to recover. There's no time. After 1, 2, 3, 4 years, the corals haven't recovered at all. So they're gone. We are causing a massive extinction event. I showed this chart. You've seen this, but hopefully there were new people. And about half the biosphere is gone. It's all red. And then more recent stuff. This is from January. 43% of tree species are at risk of extinction. 17,000 tree species. That's what this amounts to. These are two different surveys using two different methodologies. And by the way, 82% of Atlantic rainforest biome are gone, are at risk of extinction. I mean, they're not gone yet. 69% of African raptors, 80% are in decline. 1,400 bird species have already gone extinct. That's 13% of the total. I looked at the numbers from the what is the International Union of Conservation of Nature, and Noerpel. It's frightening. We are achieving numbers that rival maybe not the 5 big events yet, but certainly as much or more than any of the other 30 events. When we talk about economics, John Harvey, and I talked to you before about this, but neoclassical, neoliberal economics is the most popular, most clueless. It's what you learn in Economics 101. There is nothing in this theory that is relevant to our survival. Some smatterings of things that are useful here. I've read all of these except for feminists. That was a new one to me. But it's not about feminists per se. It's about inequality. And of course, that is a problem. So they do contribute a little bit, but it's not till you get to economics, ecological economics. This is the only school that addresses reality. Okay, so we saw that, and I think you probably saw this. And then again, of course, the first law of economics: energy conversion, entropy production determine work or economic output, but economic output is maintenance first, then waste, and then whatever's left over is growth. This is how we a good example of how we produce directly to waste, bottled water. Take something that is provided by nature, that the value of it is again what's provided by nature. And Nestle and Coca-Cola did not create this water, but they the production, the packaging, sales, and marketing, distribution, everybody takes their cut, and then they get 15 to 20% profit and sell it back to you for $1.29. It's worth less. This is how much it's worth. And so this is what's called rent seeking, and it's another evil aspect of economics, of capitalism, to take advantage of something that's already nature's providing for free and trying to make money off it. The red is energy flow through the human economy. The dots are, of course, GDP. GDP follows human economy. Here's global life expectancy, and of course, that also follows the Nearness curve, where we started exploiting fossil fuels. So if you Google the Great Acceleration, you will see dozens and dozens of these kinds of curves, some pointing up, some pointing down, some good things like life expectancy is certainly a good thing to have, but some of them also bad, like pollution. And again, some more evidence that energy growth is all about energy flows. And again, capitalism, economics, John DeLong, an economist, doesn't get it. He attributes the Nearness curve to globalization, and that's just not true. That we've been globalized for millennia. The Bronze Age had trade all around the Mediterranean and all into India and Afghanistan. So but they were doing it walking and using pack animals. So we were always had globalization. The only thing that changed here is the fossil fuels really put globalization on steroids. It's fossil fuels. So this is a really bad book. He misses that point. Andreas Malm's narrative is much more accurate, and Václav Smil's narrative, Energy, Nature, and Society. Malm's Fossil Capital describes the history more accurately. So there are, I mean, you don't have to, there are people that know more than these guys, economists just don't read good history. This is what they believe. Markets are superior devices for planning. They're not. There's a good quote by E. David, who was president of Exxon Research and Engineering in 1982. Government should implement and govern through markets. That would be a bad idea. Price signals and innovation ingenuity will solve our problems, and that is not going to happen. The ongoing extinction event markets are causing is not sending any price signals that we should stop. This is price. Price of oil since in the last 10 years, it's all over the place. There's no signal here about anything, about the scarcity of oil, about running out of oil or anything. This is reactive. It's reactive to the day-to-day noise in the news. It's not forecasting anything. There's nothing in the price signals that can forecast or tell you what's predictably what's going to happen. Again, poking fun at Milton Friedman, you have to separate economic from the physical point of view. This is exactly the problem. He has separated his economic ideology, which is the standard economics, from physical reality. He admits it. He says it, not me. Done. My case is closed, basically. Thank you, Milton Friedman. And anyway, price does not signal scarcity. It didn't here, right? There's more or less the same amount of oil here as here. It wasn't any more or less scarce. Price does not signal value. Okay. Capitalism is an economic system based on the private ownership of the means of production and the operation for profit, which means it was slavery for many, many millennia. And of course, we know about the Dred Scott decision, which favored capitalism over personal liberty and freedom. Economists believe that we can separate economic growth from material and energy inputs. And of course, well, good luck with that. We have never, ever done that. Exxon knew and lied since 1981, actually earlier than that. There's a bunch of evidence for that. Shell knew in 1988, and Shell scientists said by the time global warming becomes detectable, it could be too late to take effective countermeasures to reduce the effects or even stabilize the situation. Is exactly what James Hansen testified to Congress in 1988. Almost his language he used. Well, in 1988, it wasn't quite detectable, but it certainly is now. And indeed, I can assure you, it is too late to reduce the effects. People are dying now, and people will continue to die, and more people will die, and there'll be more destruction of the biosphere because of ongoing global warming that we can't do anything about. That's baked into the system. Is it too late to stabilize the situation? Well, we talked about this. We talked about tipping elements, and the fact of the matter is, I don't know. I don't think science knows, because some scientists say it's too late to stabilize the situation, and others don't. And these guys all know more than me. So I think it's an opinion perspective. Endocrine disruptors. Okay, human sperm counts since 1970 have fallen more than 60%. So most adult men are infertile. What sperm they have left is in many cases not as mobile as it should be, and not as viable, because it affects all three: count, mobility, and viability. And it also affects libido. So there's a lot of reasons why a lot of young men they graduate from college, and instead of moving out and getting a job in their own apartment and looking for a woman to marry and all that stuff and starting a family, they're living in their parents' basement, and they're just not interested. Again, it has to do with endocrine disruptors, and it's plastics, pesticides, and other chemical pollutions in the environment. And I stopped drinking decaffeinated coffee because the chemical that they use causes Parkin is identified with Parkinson's disease. So I said, okay, I ain't doing that anymore. Um, I think not all decaf brands use that chemical. I don't know. Adam Smith does not give sugar to capitalists. Uh, uh, only 12 economists published in mainstream economic literature correctly forecast 2008 credit crisis or the Great Contraction. That's a travesty. That's a disgrace. Steve Keen was one of them. I feature him. I talk about him all the time. He is today one of the best economists. He's never going to win a Nobel Prize because they don't like him. He tells the truth. Anyway, um, this is ridiculous that only 12. This is the bread and butter. This is what we're paying them to do, is actually predict these things ahead of time and tell us how to avoid them. There's a difference between science and orthodox economics. This orthodox economics, neoclassical neoliberalism, is an ideology. Um, and science doesn't work like that. Science converges to the truth. I mean, it starts out with a lot of wild opinions, a lot of things that end up being falsified, like the Earth in the center of the solar system, the caloric theory of heat, phlogiston, and so many other things that scientific theories have bitten the dust because there was no evidence to support them. In orthodox economics, it's not dependent on evidence, so it all thrives, and it's a matter of opinion. So therefore, like any ideology, it just diverges. Anybody's opinion is as valid as anybody else's. It really irritates me that economists. This is a good book, by the way, and Adrian Butler points out that it's obvious that the fossil fuel industry lied about climate change. I mean, they're culpable. What she points out in her whole book is about how these economists are also equally culpable because they defended that system. Capitalism forces you to lie in order to protect your shareholder value and profitability. You have to. If the Shell Oil guy in 1988 says, "Hey, we got to get out of this business," the board would have kicked them out, and they would have got somebody else in there that would have gone, to continue to improve shareholder value. So capitalism won't allow you to do that. Anyway, they're sitting around a table and deciding on the value of a whale. They cite economic value of ecotourism and the amount of our CO2 emissions a whale might sequester. The value of a whale to an economist is only its value to the economy. This makes me so angry with these guys. And of course, they came up with the $2 million per. These are large whales, by the way, sperm whales, white whales. And blue whales. From the world's perspective, remember how I defined the world. From the world's perspective, large whales are invaluable and they evolve for that purpose. They have a function in the ecosystem. They have an ecological niche, a function that they serve, that purpose, that along with and that's why they thrive until us. And so they're invaluable to the ecosystem in the biosphere. On the other hand, economists have absolutely no value whatsoever. You could take the economists and put them in on a rocket, send them to Mars, and the world would not care. And in fact, it would probably be better off. It would be happy. And that's literally true. I mean, literally true. And even to humanity, a group of experts who cannot foresee the greatest economic crisis in the current century, they're not even useful to us. I mean, you could keep the 12, right? to put the rest of them on Elon Musk rockets, just send them out. Nobody would miss them. Here's what whales do. This is just one of the many services, I mean, that they perform. We have the way the world is it recycles nutrients, iron, phosphorus, magnesium, and so forth. All these things are leached out of rocks. They get into rivers, they flow into rivers, they come into the ocean, and then they sink and are buried. Without life, that would happen. With life, they're used many times as a, you know, things eat other things, and so forth. And then when they get into the ocean, before they sink, they're used by phytoplankton, and phytoplankton, of course, are eaten by larger things, and larger fish eat smaller fish, and so on. And what whales do is they dive to the bottom and they eat generally squid, or this is what sperm whale do, and many other whales do this. They feed on the bottom, they come to the surface, and they poop. And their poop is rich in nutrients to support the phytoplankton and other life. So it's a biological pump of nutrients. And then seabirds, of course, seabirds are feasting on the life on the surface, and they're flying inland and landing and you know, basically crapping and dying on land. And anadromous fish like salmon do the same thing. They eat here, and then they swim upriver and spawn and die. And along the way, of course, they get eaten by bears and things like this. And all the wild mammals, that many of which these big animals that we've already sent to extinction, like these guys, would feast at the rivers on the Andromelus fish, and then move inland and again spread the nutrients around. So we lost this pump by 92%. This pump has been reduced by 96%, and this pump is reduced by 77%. So this biological pump, which recirculates nutrients to keep life going, and you can see whales have an integral role in that. That's worth more than $2 million. Certainly, you know, you can't get economists to do this. It would be great. We could put them to use. You know, they can come in here, they could feed on, they could dive to the bottom, feed on whatever they can get, and come up here and poop. If you can train economists to do that, they'd be worthwhile. They would have some value. Okay, this is the story. This is new. This is today. I downloaded this. This is the surface temperature. It's been in record territory since about April of last year, and it's still wandering around in record territory. Ocean temperatures are insane. You know, since March of last year and into April of this year, so 13 months, more than 13 months, it's been in record territory, and by a huge amount. And Gavin Schmidt, just a few days ago, wrote an article and he's chairman of, or head, he's the head of NASA GISH, which is Goddard Institute for Space Studies. And he wrote an article in Nature, and he says, we don't know why this happened. We can't explain it. The models do not predict this. This is beyond the pale of what anybody expected. Okay, so that should be frightening. If that doesn't frighten you, I don't know what does. Okay, but it's evidence that James Hansen might be correct, and I think you might have seen this. The IPCC said the doubling of atmospheric carbon dioxide would cause the temperature to rise 3.2 degrees. James Hansen last December said 4.8 degrees. Now we have visual evidence of that maybe Hansen is right. There's also considerable evidence in the 4 to 6 degree regime that supports Hansen. This is all different kinds of evidence, threads of evidence. And still down here below 1.5 degrees, where the deniers range, there is zero evidence. There's nothing that supports them, no data or evidence. They just make stuff up. Okay, if we look at the climate action tracker, this is December 2023. I could update it. What they're claiming is an optimistic scenario. The best we can do is 1.8 degrees. This is what I've been saying. 1.5 degrees is dead. Pledges and targets, it's 2.1 degrees. The optimistic scenario is unlikely. This is more likely, which means the 2-degree target is dead. 2030 targets only 2.5 degrees. But our policies and actions are up around 2.7, almost 3 degrees, except that they're assuming the IPCC. So I ran the numbers. I said, let's pretend Hansen is right, and you see that we're looking at 2.7 to 4. At 4, we go extinct. So we really need to address this problem. And 2.7, life is going to become extremely uncomfortable. We don't need to do that. This is how much energy we need for everybody to have a decent life, 128 exajoules. We are burning 604 exajoules. So all of this literally is waste in some sense. Maybe it's not waste because maybe there's things we do with it, but the vast majority is waste. And we're burning this much, and this is where capitalism fails. Okay, anybody that says capitalism is efficient or successful or credits capitalism with all the great stuff we have doesn't look at this chart, because not only is it burning up all this excess energy, it's not feeding everybody. I mean, we still have people that half the population of the world doesn't have a decent life according to the definition in this book, which is pretty generous. By the way, this was calculated by a bunch of physicists, so you can trust that it wasn't from economics. And what we're trying to claim is that this little piddling solar and wind up here, this little tiny line that you can hardly see, is going to replace all of this by 2050. And it has to include traditional biomass and modern biofuels too, because all of that, in addition to these guys, emits greenhouse gases. So more than 90% of our energy comes from greenhouse gas sources. In the meantime, EIA is forecasting that carbon emissions will go up, not down. And so to achieve net zero, we would have to have 144,000 terawatt hours per year of energy for DAX. And I did this computation. I don't know if you saw this or not, but to burning coal, enough coal to produce 1 million tons of carbon dioxide produces 550 million kilowatt hours of electricity. But to pull that out of the atmosphere requires about 6 coal-fired power plants. This requires 6 times the energy as the energy you got from it in the first place. It's totally thermodynamically stupid to do direct air carbon capture and storage. IEA says that it's going to, we're still going to produce way too much, but at least it's going to go down a little bit. Hopefully both are wrong. Median power densities of fossil fuels. This is why we use these things and not these things, and why it's going to be difficult to take these things and replace these things. 1 barrel of oil is equivalent to 4.5 years of your labor. Again, we see this, we saw this, and I think I showed you this, that we're not the first species organism to cause a major extinction event. Okay, we're causing the Holocene extinction. These guys caused these extinctions, and it's basically the same thing. A species discovered a new innovation, a new type of metabolism, and there was no checks. There was no insufficient predation or or negative feedbacks to control the population. So the populations went out of control. Here is happening now, and the consequences were, of course, an extinction event. And this is exactly what we're doing. And so we're behaving like vascular plants. We assume they don't have free will. They just go with it. They find a way to live. They want to live. It's life, and they go and they explode. We're doing the same thing. I'll leave it to philosophers to debate whether we have free will, but we definitely are not exhibiting free will. If we have it, we're abusing it. We're not using it. I may have showed you this. We are on plan B. This is exactly where we're heading. We are not, and we need to get on plan A. And so that's what I talk about. Some of the stuff in the beginning about global cooperation and so forth. And of course, plastic pollution. And so we have 6 problems. Ecological collapse is number 1. This is the problem that we're causing this extinction event. Climate change is a problem because it does feed to this. It's happening way too fast for civilization or species to adapt. Weapons of mass destruction, of course, that's what separates us from the other 3 guys. Moss and vascular plants didn't have weapons of mass destruction, so they just naturally died back and they survived, and there's still moss today, but it's unlikely to be us. We're not going to survive our own folly. Of course, neoclassical economists have the wrong model. We talked about that. Capitalism encourages dishonesty, rewards greed, and promotes psychopaths, and requires exponential growth ad nauseum to function, which is impossible. So what is the alternative? And now I want to separate capitalism from entrepreneurship. Capitalism is not necessary to have entrepreneurship. Okay, we can create, we can invent, and we can be motivated to create an event without thinking that we want to be billionaires. And we're suffering mass psychosis because we bought into this. We have a lot of plans. You've probably heard of the drawdown and Mark Jacobson's stuff and everything, but they all have flaws. They're trying to say that, look, we could take solar and wind and we can replace fossil fuels. And there are other plans, Eric Larson's and Simon Michaud's. I read this is 1,000 pages. Thomas Murphy's another good one. They're not bad. They're not wrong. Okay, in any big sense, except they're ignoring stuff. Okay, so they're ignoring a water crisis. You have to leave stuff out. By 2030, we'll need, in order to everybody has adequate supply of fresh water, we'll need 6,000 terawatt hours. That's not per year of energy. That's not in any of those plans. That's the support for that. By the way, algae farming is not going to work. People still talk about it. Biofuels, forget about it. You need as much land for corn-based ethanol and soy-based biodiesel as are now forest. We'd have to destroy every bit of forest in the world to use these. And the water needed is 8 times total water withdrawals today, which isn't going to happen. Another hockey stick is our use of global phosphate rock production. Half the world is living on synthetic fertilizers. Now, the exponential roadmap was one of those guys. They recognized that instead of setting goals for 2050, we should set goals for every 10 years for 2030. They realize, and they're right, that there's no way that solar and wind are going to be able to replace. You're not going to be able to build out solar and wind in anywhere near the velocity in order to replace a significant amount of fossil fuels. So what they're proposing to do is, of course, 58,000 terawatt hours reduction due to efficiency gains. Okay, that's not going to happen. Anyway, they're behind the times because we're in 2024 already, and this has to happen by 20, in 6 years. These are not solutions. Biological enhanced carbon capture and storage, okay, requires land. So what are you going to do? You're going to feed fewer people, or you're going to take it away from wildlife? Okay. And anyway, we don't, the yes there is storage, and we have no solution for that. Biofuels require land, water, synthetic fertilizers. It's just not, we should stay away from this. We should not even entertain this. Geoengineering, reducing solar energy inputs, reduces net primary productivity, then thus negatively impacts biodiversity. DAX, of course, it's absurd how much energy it requires. And every time you hear the good news about how we're going to pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, they talk about the cost. Nobody mentions the energy. Cost is irrelevant. You can print the money. It's the energy that matters, because you can't print the energy. Efficiency gains, that ain't going to happen. We know that, right? Javon's paradox, or the rebound effect. When you improve efficiency, you start using more energy. Carbon market offsets, okay, you can eat your cake and pay somebody else to starve if you want. Fusion, this technology is unfortunately 35 years always in the future. It'd be nice if we had it, but it's not anywhere near being able to be produced now. If in January 1st, 2020, we stopped all forms of emissions except for what agriculture does, we would still exceed 2 degrees. Okay. So we have to address agriculture. Now, we have to do regenerative agriculture, and these are a lot of the things we have to do. We're not doing it because it's too easy to just synthetic chemicals to do this factory farming or highly intensive farming, which actually turns soil into dirt. I know Gina knows the difference between soil and dirt. Soil is alive. Dirt is just a medium that you can grow the plant in, but you have to provide all the stuff. There are farmers. Gabe Brown is a farmer that farms 5,000 acres at least. I think he's up to 5,000 acres, and he farms regeneratively. But even his story is 4 decades old. He started with tilling and using chemicals, the plain old way, and he got hit 2 years in a row with hail, and he lost his whole crop, and he was going bankrupt. And the government had a program where if he transitioned to regenerative agriculture, they would give him a grant. He was forced to do it, and he didn't. It took him a while. He just couldn't do it right away. He had to gradually do it, and it took time, and he needed the government subsidy to do it. And he gives talks and lectures now to farmers, and they believe him because he's a farmer. He's one of them. They're not going to believe, if someone makes a movie with a bunch of actors and says to do regenerative agriculture. I heard one farmer say, "I'm not going to listen to a bunch of actors." But they'll listen to Gabe Brown. And I think if you want to make a documentary about how good regenerative agriculture is, don't use actors. Okay, because the people you want to convince are the farmers. Gabe Brown also goes to Congress. He's done it many times, and ask for federal subsidy to help farmers make this transition. Okay, we cannot afford billionaires. Billionaires are the ones that are consuming making most of the CO2 emissions and making the biggest messes. And other reasons we can't use billionaires is they're the ones that are funding all the lies about Trump winning the election. That came, and QAnon, that's all funded by billionaires, and they have their reasons, I guess. Rupert Murdoch's is a good example. We can't afford these people. We can't afford them Socially, we can't afford them from a physical perspective. We just can't afford billionaires. We have to get rid of them. And I don't mean the people, I mean the lifestyle. Um, and then we have a legacy. This is Nixon's legacy of regulation: the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Environmental Protection Agency, Endangered Species Act, and so forth. He was probably one of the most environmentally friendly presidents we ever had, maybe second only to Theodore Roosevelt. There are pre-Reagan examples of conservative support for the environment. Lacey Act and the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. These saved migratory birds in the waterfowl in the Chesapeake Bay. In the post-Reagan conservative movement in the U.S. has become extremely anti-environment. The Reagan administration tried to kill all of Nixon-era environmental reforms and his legacy. And again, you saw this. So this is what we have to do. We know we have to do that. We can balance the budget if we tax the wealthy. In fact, the wealthy, this is taxes that the billionaires owe that they just don't pay, even if they have a low tax bill to begin with. And we could save an enormous amount of money, not just us, but all the countries of the world if we could get along. And if we can't get along, you know, I don't know what to say about our chances. Medicare for all would save $450 billion per year. So again, this is another venue of capitalism, which is costing us money and costing us lives. Private insurance, health insurance. Reducing aviation emissions. China has 45,000 kilometers of rail, high-speed rail, and it's growing 3,000 kilometers per year. Even in 2010, President Obama says it makes no sense for China to have a better rail system than the US. That used to be us. And again, it requires federal government subsidy to do that. China's paying for this. Just like the Eisenhower interstate highway system. We gave cars that big bonus. This is China's, this is as of November last year, the end of November 27th, 2023, high-speed rail. And this is regular rail. The country is fairly nicely connected. There's these big barren spots. I think this is a big desert anyway. To go from Beijing up here to Hong Kong takes, I looked at the schedule, it takes 8.8 hours and 56 minutes. A plane from Washington, D.C. to Dallas in the same distance, I looked up on the schedule, it takes 2:45 nonstop, but 8 hours and 50 minutes with one stop, and I couldn't get a nonstop flight. I mean, I wasn't trying to fly there. I wasn't actually booking a flight. I just wanted to see what I could do on a particular day. And so the plane is essentially the same. This is 8 hours away or 9 hours away. High-speed rail is viable and competitive with air travel for the bulk of our travel. And in fact, it does not include runway taxiing, going through security, airport locations outside of the cities, and the airport locations are outside of the city centers. So it doesn't include, taking your shoes off and things like that. But it also doesn't include the fact that your Dulles Airport, you have to get into Washington, D.C. to do your business. So the solution, okay, and capitalism is one extreme. Communism is another extreme, Soviet-style central planning. The economist Nate Higgins points out that capitalism and Soviet-style central planning, or Soviet version of communism, require growth to exist. And of course, we can't grow. The economy is too big already. And the only way to pull all that stuff back into safe planetary boundaries is to degrow the economy. It's the only way, because there's just too many of them, and it's too big a task. Globalization, localization, we are globalized. We can't do anything about that. We've been globalizing ever since Homo erectus ventured out of Africa 1.8 million years ago. We've been globalizing. That's in our nature. There's no point in saying globalization is harming us or helping us. It's just what we do. We like to move around, but we can generate a more vibrant local economy. We don't have to rely on our food coming all the way from Brazil, right? We can grow food locally. If the globalization makes us resilient, we need that. Entrepreneurship, we think that's capitalism, but it's not. We can separate out entrepreneurship. We have plenty of inventors and people writing books and everything, and just being happy to make a living, and so forth. We can encourage that. We can encourage personal freedom and responsibility, and we should recognize that freedom comes with responsibility. People want to be free, they don't want responsibility. And then socialism. Okay, socialism is a good thing, right? Government should be involved in the things that are necessary, like public schools and education and things like that. The solution is moderation. Hesiod said, moderation in all things, back the Greek poet. This is where Bernie Sanders really was putting us, in social democracy, a steady state economy. These are parts of the solution. Obviously, we eliminate the easy, the low-hanging fruit, eliminate single-use plastic. We have better ways to do that kind of thing. High-speed rail, we can replace an awful. If we had that infrastructure, we could eliminate a lot of the emissions due to air travel, right? And all this stuff. And so I talked about all this stuff. And obviously, reduce consumption. Capitalism thrives on consumption. And so the planned obsolescence is a capitalistic thing, right? You do that if you're a capitalist. If you're running a company and you have a product, you build in planned obsolescence so that your customers have to come back and buy the next product. They have to buy, I have a 23, an S23. They already come out with S24. They want me to buy the latest feature. Well, I don't know. I had a 5 and I had to upgrade because I got a notice that they weren't going to support it anymore in my network. And we need strong central democratic government. We have to recognize that democratic governments are not the same as the governments that Milton Friedman and von Hayek were concerned about, which is dictatorships. Okay. If we have a strong democratic government, the government is not the problem. The government is us, right? It's of the people, by the people, for the people. It's not the problem. It's us. So this will not work. All these things will not work. Technology, we can use technology. There's no reason why we can't. I think I'm a little bit afraid of artificial intelligence, because I don't think artificial intelligence is going to have the same goals as humans, right? We're very human centric. We're a self-important species. We're not the most intelligent species, but we are the most self-important species. And there's no reason why general artificial intelligence would assume that we're as important as we think we are. And like, we don't think very much of other life forms. We're willing to let them go extinct. We don't care. Why would general artificial intelligence treat us any differently? It might be fond of us, might treat us like pets, but it's not necessarily going to have the same vision of humanity that we do. It might see us as that it has to cull the population. We're nice, we're a good pet, but there's just too many of us. So I wouldn't trust this like people do. And technology just makes things more complicated. Now we could use it, but again, there's no silver bullets there. What will work? Of course, we have to save ourselves. We do already have enough technology. We know about regenerative agriculture. It's highly technical. It represents advances in agriculture. It's an evolutionary process in agriculture that we figured out how to do regenerative agriculture. There's an awful lot of science there and compatible cropping and rotating of crops and stuff. That was stuff that wasn't known. Be curious, care, be kind, be kind, be kind. Critical thinking, it's just the willingness to be wrong. And of course, that's not going to happen with ideology. Okay, so that's done. Thank you very much.